Picture this: May 1945. American troops storm a luxurious villa in Bavaria. Inside, they discover room after room filled with stolen masterpieces: Rembrandts, Vermeers, golden chalices, priceless jewels scattered across marble floors. But as investigators catalog the staggering collection, they realize something disturbing. This represents only a fraction of what Hermann Goering accumulated during the war. The question that would haunt historians for decades was suddenly unavoidable. Where did the rest of it go? Goering's treasure wasn't just valuable, it represented the systematic plundering of an entire continent. Museums emptied, private collections seized, Jewish families stripped of their heritage, and when the war ended, much of it simply vanished. Some say it's buried in Austrian mountain lakes. Others claim it's hidden in forgotten mine shafts across Germany. A few believe it's sitting in private collections, its dark history carefully concealed. What we know for certain is this: billions of dollars worth of art and treasure that once belonged to Hitler's second-in-command has never been found. This is the story of history's most enigmatic hidden fortune and the obsessive hunt to recover what remains. Hermann Wilhelm Goering. The name alone conjures images of excess, power, and corruption on an almost incomprehensible scale. As Reichsmarshal of Nazi Germany and Hitler's designated successor, Goering wielded more influence than almost anyone else in the Third Reich. But beyond his military and political roles, Goering harbored a consuming passion that would define his legacy in unexpected ways. He was an obsessive art collector. Unlike the cold, austere Hitler, Goering loved luxury. He adorned himself in elaborate uniforms dripping with medals. He hosted lavish parties at his vast estate, Carinhall, named after his first wife. And he amassed what many consider the greatest private art collection ever assembled by a single individual. At its peak, his collection contained over 1,500 paintings, sculptures, tapestries, and antiquities worth billions in today's currency. But here's what makes this story so compelling. Goering didn't purchase these treasures through legitimate means. He stole them. He used the full machinery of the Nazi state to systematically loot occupied territories across Europe. France, Poland, Austria, the Netherlands, wherever the Wehrmacht conquered, Goering's agents followed, stripping museums and private homes of their cultural treasures. When the war turned against Germany, Goering faced a crisis. His empire was crumbling, Allied forces were closing in from all sides, and he possessed a collection so vast that moving it would require careful planning and absolute secrecy. What happened next has puzzled researchers, treasure hunters, and historians for nearly 8 decades. To understand what happened to Goering's treasure, you first need to understand the man himself, and more importantly, his relationship with art. Goering didn't collect art because he appreciated it in any meaningful way. According to those who knew him, he could barely distinguish a Rembrandt from a reproduction. What he loved was possession, ownership, the ability to walk through Carinhall's galleries and know that he controlled beauty that others could only dream of seeing. His collection strategy was brutally simple. In occupied France, he established a special task force called the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg. This organization had one purpose: to identify, catalog, and seize valuable artworks, particularly from Jewish families who had already been deported or murdered. The Nazis didn't see this as theft. They framed it as safeguarding cultural property. Goering himself made frequent trips to Paris, where seized artworks were stored at the Jeu de Paume Museum before distribution. He would arrive in his custom train car, spend hours selecting pieces for his personal collection, then have them shipped back to Germany. Witnesses described these visits as shopping trips. Goering would point at paintings like someone browsing a department store, indicating which ones he wanted loaded onto his train. The scale was staggering. Between 1940 and 1944, Nazi forces confiscated approximately 100,000 art objects from France alone. Goering personally claimed nearly 1,400 of these pieces. He traded with other high-ranking Nazis, swapping paintings he didn't want for ones that better suited his taste. He even commissioned forgeries when he couldn't obtain originals, though he seemed genuinely unaware that some pieces in his collection were fakes. But Goering's treasure extended beyond paintings. He accumulated medieval armor, ancient manuscripts, rare coins, jewelry, religious artifacts, and even entire furniture collections. At Carinhall, entire rooms were dedicated to specific periods or styles. One gallery featured only Dutch masters. Another displayed Gothic tapestries. A third housed classical sculptures. The estate itself became a monument to his ego. Built in the 1930s as a hunting lodge, Carinhall eventually sprawled across thousands of acres. It included artificial lakes, a private zoo, extensive gardens, and a main building that rivaled any palace in Europe. The art collection was displayed throughout, creating what Goering imagined as a cultural center that would cement his legacy as a great patron of the arts. He never seemed to grasp the irony. These weren't his treasures to display. Every painting represented a family robbed of their heritage. Every sculpture was evidence of cultural genocide. As the Allied forces advanced toward Germany in late 1944, that uncomfortable truth was about to catch up with him. By January 1945, Goering knew his world was ending. Soviet forces were pushing from the east. American and British troops were advancing from the west. Berlin itself would soon become a battlefield. For most people, survival became the only priority. But for Goering, protecting his collection remained paramount. What happened next is where the mystery truly begins. Historical records indicate that Goering ordered his most prized possessions evacuated from Carinhall in February 1945. Witnesses reported seeing dozens of trucks loaded with crates departing the estate under heavy guard. But here's where accounts start to diverge. Some reports suggest the convoy headed south toward Bavaria, where Goering maintained several properties. Others claim portions of the collection went east, toward less obvious locations. We know that Goering personally supervised the destruction of Carinhall in late April, just days before Soviet troops arrived. He ordered the estate dynamited, leaving nothing but ruins. Whether this was to prevent the Soviets from claiming it or to conceal evidence of where his treasures had been sent remains unclear. Meanwhile, American troops were making their own discoveries. In early April 1945, soldiers from the Third Army stumbled upon a massive cache of artwork in the Altusee salt mine in Austria. The mine contained thousands of pieces, paintings, sculptures, gold reserves, all carefully stored in the cool, dry underground chambers. Hitler had planned to use this location for his never-realized Führer Museum in Linz. But Goering's collection wasn't there, at least not most of it. On May 7th, American forces finally caught up with the Reichsmarshal himself near the Austrian border. He had been attempting to negotiate a surrender, apparently believing he could still play a political role in post-war Europe. During his interrogation, Goering provided investigators with a property near Berchtesgaden, where he claimed much of his collection had been sent. What they found there was both astonishing and puzzling. Inside a large villa and several storage buildings, American soldiers discovered approximately 1,100 artworks, cases of jewelry, and numerous antiquities. The recovery represented the largest single seizure of looted art from a Nazi official. Photographs from the time show American soldiers standing amid Vermeers, Cranach's, and Rubens' paintings stacked like merchandise in a warehouse. But even as catalogers worked through the recovery, a troubling question emerged. Where was the rest? Goering had documented his collection meticulously. He employed professional photographers and art historians who created detailed inventories with descriptions and photographs of each piece. These records, recovered after the war, revealed a collection of approximately 1,500 significant works. Yet the Berchtesgaden cache contained only 1,100 items. That meant roughly 400 pieces were unaccounted for. Some might have been lost during the chaotic evacuation. War damage, theft by German soldiers, or simple mismanagement could explain some disappearances. But investigators found something else troubling in Goering's records. Notations suggesting certain pieces had been moved to alternative locations. References to special storage and secure facilities appeared next to dozens of the most valuable works. The hunt was only beginning. The American military didn't undertake the recovery effort alone. They enlisted the help of a specialized unit that would later become famous: the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives Program, known popularly as the Monuments Men. These were art historians, museum curators, and archivists in uniform. Their mission was to locate, protect, and repatriate cultural treasures looted by the Nazis. What they uncovered in the months following Germany's surrender was almost beyond comprehension. Hidden repositories emerged across the country. Mines, castles, country estates, and even underground bunkers contained stolen artworks by the thousands. But Goering's collection presented unique challenges. Unlike centralized Nazi repositories meant for public museums, Goering had created a personal empire. He moved pieces between properties, gifted items to curry favor with other officials, and maintained secretive storage locations known only to his closest associates. Unraveling the network required not just investigation, but interrogation. American investigators questioned everyone who had worked for Goering: his secretaries, art agents, drivers, guards, anyone who might know where additional caches were hidden. Some cooperated willingly. Others remained loyal even in defeat, providing vague or contradictory information. A few seemed genuinely unaware of the full extent of Goering's holdings. One particularly valuable source was Bruno Lohse, an art historian who had served as one of Goering's primary agents in Paris. Under interrogation, Lohse revealed the intricate systems Goering had used to transport and conceal artwork. He described secret railway shipments, artworks hidden in diplomatic pouches, and arrangements with Swiss intermediaries to move particularly valuable pieces beyond Allied reach. Lohse's testimony led to several significant discoveries, but it also introduced more questions. He mentioned properties Goering owned or controlled that investigators had no record of. He referenced deals with collectors outside Germany, suggesting some artworks may have left the country entirely before the war ended. Most tantalizingly, he spoke of a contingency plan Goering had discussed in early 1945, a way to preserve his collection should Germany be completely overrun. What was that plan? Lohse claimed he didn't know specifics. Goering had kept his most sensitive arrangements to himself or shared them only with one or two trusted individuals. And those individuals, if they existed, either died during the war's final days or successfully melted back into civilian life without revealing what they knew. The Monuments Men recovered thousands of artworks from Goering's holdings through 1945 and 1946. They worked tirelessly to identify original owners and arrange repatriations. Many pieces were returned to museums in France, the Netherlands, and other occupied territories. Some went back to the families from whom they'd been stolen, though often those families no longer existed, murdered in the Holocaust. But for all their success, the accounting never closed. The gap between documented holdings and recovered artworks persisted. Investigators ultimately concluded that approximately 300 to 400 pieces remained missing, and they had exhausted their most promising leads. In the decades that followed, the search would become the domain of private researchers, treasure hunters, and a new generation of investigators armed with better technology and access to previously classified documents. If you mention Goering's treasure to anyone familiar with the legend, they'll likely bring up Lake Toplitz. This remote Austrian lake, nestled in the Alps and surrounded by mountains, has become synonymous with Nazi treasure myths. Its waters are cold, deep, and murky, perfect conditions for preserving secrets. In the final days of the war, witnesses reported seeing Nazi personnel throwing crates into Lake Toplitz. Diving expeditions over the years have recovered various items from the lake, counterfeit British currency from a Nazi operation to destabilize the British economy, ammunition boxes, and even human remains. But no significant artworks or treasure. Yet the legend persists. Some theorists insist that Goering, knowing his capture was imminent, ordered some of his most valuable pieces hidden in Alpine lakes where they could potentially be recovered later. The theory has enough circumstantial evidence to remain tantalizing. Goering did spend time in the region. He did have trusted subordinates who knew the area, and the Alpine lakes would indeed provide effective concealment. But there's a problem with the theory. Artwork doesn't survive underwater. Paintings, especially oil paintings on canvas, would deteriorate rapidly even in cold water. Wood panel paintings would fare slightly better, but still suffer significant damage. The only items that might survive are metal objects, jewelry, or gold, and while Goering did possess such items, his truly irreplaceable treasures were the paintings. Still, treasure hunters continue to focus on Alpine locations. In 2001, a team using ground-penetrating radar claimed to have identified anomalies near a mountain lodge once used by Goering. Excavation permissions were denied, leaving the claim unverified. In 2015, another group announced they had evidence of hidden chambers in a mine shaft near Berchtesgaden. That investigation also stalled due to legal complications and lack of funding. Then there are the more exotic theories. Some believe Goering arranged for portions of his collection to be smuggled to South America, where Nazi sympathizers maintain networks to support fleeing war criminals. Argentina, particularly, has been mentioned as a potential destination. The theory suggests that some of Goering's most valuable paintings could be hanging in private collections in Buenos Aires or elsewhere, their true provenance carefully hidden. The problem with these theories is the lack of concrete evidence. While we know some Nazis did escape to South America, and some did take valuables with them, there's no documentary proof linking Goering's collection to these escape routes. Goering himself never escaped. He was captured, tried at Nuremberg, and committed suicide in his cell. If he arranged for treasure to be moved to South America, he took that secret with him. What about buried treasure in traditional sense? Could Goering have simply ordered valuable items buried on properties he controlled? It's possible, and it has happened with other Nazi loots. In 2015, German authorities discovered a massive collection of artwork in a Munich apartment belonging to Cornelius Gurlitt, son of one of Hitler's art dealers. The collection had been hidden for 70 years. But that discovery also highlights the challenge. The Gurlitt cache was found not through treasure hunting or ground-penetrating radar, but through a tax investigation that led authorities to his apartment. Sometimes the most effectively hidden treasures are hidden in plain sight, passed down through families who keep their origins secret. Not all of Goering's missing treasure remains missing. Several significant pieces have been recovered over the decades, each discovery telling its own fascinating story. In 1964, a painting by Lucas Cranach the Elder surfaced in an art gallery in Switzerland. The work, depicting Adam and Eve, matched descriptions in Goering's inventory. The gallery owner claimed to have acquired it legitimately through intermediaries, but investigation revealed it had been sold by someone with connections to former Nazi officials. The painting was eventually repatriated to its rightful owners in Austria. Jump forward to 1999. A German art researcher named Maike Hoffmann was examining a painting that had recently been offered for sale to a museum. Something about the provenance seemed off. After checking wartime records, she discovered the painting, a Dutch landscape, had been stolen from a Jewish family in Amsterdam and later appeared in Goering's collection. It had passed through several owners since 1945, each apparently unaware of its dark history. The painting was returned to the descendants of the original owners. These discoveries share a common pattern. Most recovered artworks weren't found through dramatic excavations or treasure hunts. They surfaced in the legitimate art market, sometimes decades after the war ended. Someone would attempt to sell a painting. An alert researcher or dealer would notice something suspicious about its documented history. Investigation would follow, revealing the piece's connection to Goering. This pattern suggests something important. Many missing pieces probably did survive and are currently in private collections. The owners may have no idea they possess stolen property. The artwork might have been purchased in good faith by their parents or grandparents, who also had no knowledge of its origins. Or in some cases, the owners might have suspicions but choose to remain silent. One of the most significant recoveries happened in 2009. A Dutch family came forward with a painting they had inherited, Jan Steen's The Doctor's Visit. Research confirmed it had been looted from a Jewish collector in Amsterdam and later became part of Goering's collection. How did it end up with this family? Their grandfather, a Dutch police officer, had apparently acquired it in the chaotic aftermath of the war. The family, to their credit, immediately agreed to restitution once they learned the truth. But for every recovery, there are reminders of what remains lost. Take the case of the Portrait of a Young Man by Raphael. This painting, considered one of the most important missing artworks from World War II, was last definitively seen in Krakow, Poland in 1939. Some accounts suggest it passed through Goering's hands, though this isn't confirmed. If it did, it would be among his most valuable pieces. Today, its location is completely unknown. Similarly, numerous works by Vermeer, one of the rarest and most valuable artists, disappeared during the war. Goering owned several Vermeers, or thought he did. One famous case involved Christ and the Adulteress, which Goering acquired in a trade with a Dutch dealer. Only after the war did experts determine it was actually a forgery by Han van Meegeren, a brilliant Dutch painter who fooled even experienced art historians. That discovery led to one of the most unusual art trials in history, where Van Meegeren had to prove he was a forger to avoid more serious charges of collaboration. But the real Vermeers that Goering owned? Most were recovered, but at least one or two mentioned in his documents have never been located. Something interesting happened as the decades passed. Initial post-war investigations were urgent and resource-intensive, but by the 1950s, priorities shifted. The world was moving on. Investigators were reassigned. Records were archived. For many years, the search for Nazi-looted art became a specialty interest pursued by dedicated individuals rather than a coordinated international effort. But starting in the 1990s, a renaissance in provenance research began. Multiple factors converged to renew interest in wartime looting. Holocaust education became more prominent. Survivors and their descendants became more vocal about seeking restitution. Museums faced increased scrutiny about their collections. And most importantly, international agreements established clearer frameworks for handling disputed artwork. The Washington Principles, adopted in 1998 by 44 nations, set forth guidelines for identifying and resolving issues with Nazi-looted art. Museums and galleries were encouraged to research their collections and make their findings public. This led to numerous discoveries of problematic pieces that had been hiding in plain sight for 50 years. Technology also changed the game. Digitization of archives made records accessible to researchers worldwide. Databases were created specifically to track looted artwork. The Art Loss Register, established in 1991, maintains the world's largest private database of stolen art, including many pieces from Goering's collection. These developments led to a new wave of discoveries. In 2000, the Mauerbach sale in Austria made headlines when the Austrian government sold nearly 8,000 artworks recovered from Nazi hoards, using the proceeds to compensate victims. Some of these pieces had connections to Goering's network of dealers and intermediaries. More recently, in 2013, the Dutch government conducted a comprehensive review of its national art collection and identified numerous works with questionable provenance. Several were traced back to Goering's collecting activities. The transparent approach, publicly acknowledging problematic pieces and working toward restitution, represented a new willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But time also works against recovery. Witnesses die, memories fade, buildings are demolished, potentially destroying hidden caches. Private collectors who might have known the truth take their secrets to the grave. Every passing year makes the hunt more difficult. Consider this. If Goering did tell someone where certain pieces were hidden, that person would likely be over 100 years old now. Any second or third-hand knowledge would be fragmented, subject to the distortions of memory and retelling. Physical landmarks mentioned in 70-year-old testimony may no longer exist. Yet investigators remain optimistic. They point to cases like the discovery of medieval church treasures in Hungary in 2014, found based on a witness account recorded decades earlier. Or the 2017 discovery of a hidden room in a Polish palace containing artworks thought lost during the war. These finds prove that significant discoveries remain possible even after all this time. So where do we stand today? What are investigators actually pursuing when it comes to Goering's missing treasure? Several active lines of inquiry exist, though details are often kept confidential to prevent interference or looting. First, there's continued analysis of captured documents. As archives digitize their holdings, researchers sometimes find previously overlooked references. A mention of a property here, a financial transaction there. Small pieces that might form a larger pattern. In 2018, a researcher at the National Archives discovered a memo referencing a storage facility near Munich that hadn't been checked during post-war investigations. The facility no longer exists, but the discovery prompted searches of nearby buildings constructed around the same time. Second, investigators focus on tracking the networks of dealers and intermediaries Goering used. Many of these individuals continued in the art world after the war. Their business records, when they can be accessed, sometimes reveal clues about artwork origins. Following these paper trails has led to several recent recoveries, though none directly from Goering's main collection. Third, there's renewed interest in properties Goering owned, but which weren't thoroughly searched immediately after the war. This includes hunting lodges, apartments maintained under false names, and properties owned by shell companies. Modern research techniques and property records have identified several locations that warrant investigation, though accessing them legally remains challenging. Perhaps most intriguingly, some investigators are looking at financial records. Goering maintained accounts with Swiss banks, used front companies to move money, and conducted transactions designed to obscure the trail. Financial forensics might reveal where money went in late 1944 and early 1945, and money often follows art. Private organizations have also entered the search. The Commission for Looted Art in Europe, founded in 1999, works with families seeking restitution. They've successfully identified and recovered hundreds of pieces of Nazi-looted art, including several items documented in Goering's collection. Their work continues, fueled by increasing cooperation from museums and collectors. Then there are the treasure hunters, individuals who dedicate significant resources to searching for hidden Nazi valuables. Some are serious researchers using legitimate methods. Others are adventurers motivated by the romantic notion of discovering hidden treasure. And a few, unfortunately, are opportunists who damage historical sites in their searches. One current theory getting serious attention involves the salt mine complex near Bad Ischl in Austria. While the main Alpine mine was thoroughly searched, the complex contains numerous smaller tunnels and chambers. Some were sealed after the war for safety reasons and have never been properly investigated. Recent surveys using modern equipment have identified sealed chambers that might contain wartime materials. Efforts are underway to access these areas safely. Another focus is private collections in Eastern Europe. During the Cold War, artwork looted by Soviet forces during their advance into Germany largely disappeared behind the Iron Curtain. Some surfaced after the Soviet Union collapsed, but documentation suggests many pieces remain in private hands in Russia, Ukraine, and other former Soviet republics. Whether any of Goering's missing works ended up in these collections remains unclear, but it's being investigated. With all the resources dedicated to finding Goering's missing treasure, why hasn't it been completely solved? Several factors keep this mystery alive. First is the sheer scale of wartime chaos. Between January and May 1945, Germany was literally falling apart. Millions of people were on the move: refugees, retreating soldiers, displaced persons, advancing armies. Transportation networks were destroyed. Buildings were bombed. Records were burned. In that environment, tracking specific crates of artwork through the chaos is enormously difficult, even with the benefit of hindsight. Second, some people had incentive to hide the truth. German officials and soldiers who possessed looted art after the war weren't eager to announce it. Some pieces were sold on the black market. Others were simply kept and the origins concealed. Families who received or purchased such artwork, even unknowingly, might not want to admit it decades later. Third, good faith uncertainty exists about what's actually missing. Goering's records, while extensive, weren't perfect. Some items may have been destroyed, lost during transport, or traded away in ways that weren't documented. The gap between recorded inventory and recovered pieces might be smaller than it appears if we account for items that no longer exist. Fourth, the legitimate art market provides cover for looted pieces. Artwork changes hands regularly, and provenance can be obscured through careful transactions. A painting stolen in 1943 might have been sold 5 or 6 times since 1945, each transaction moving it further from its origins. Unless someone specifically researches its history, a questionable piece can circulate indefinitely. There's also a psychological factor. The legend of Goering's treasure has taken on a life of its own. Every unsolved aspect feeds speculation. Every alleged lead that goes nowhere generates new theories. The story has become part of popular culture, inspiring books, documentaries, and even movies. This attention can actually hinder serious investigation by attracting amateurs and creating noise that obscures legitimate research. But perhaps the most significant factor is simply the passage of time. We're approaching 80 years since the war ended. Physical evidence degrades. Human memory becomes unreliable. The opportunity for definitive answers narrows with each passing year. Yet investigators continue because the stakes extend beyond monetary value. These artworks represent cultural heritage stolen from their rightful owners. Many were taken from Jewish families who were subsequently murdered. Recovering these pieces isn't just about art, it's about justice, memory, and historical truth. So what really happened to Goering's hidden treasure? Here's what we know with certainty. Hermann Goering assembled one of the largest private art collections in history through systematic looting across Nazi-occupied Europe. His collection contained approximately 1,500 significant works, plus countless smaller pieces, jewelry, and antiquities. When Germany's defeat became inevitable, he attempted to protect his collection by dispersing it to multiple locations. After his capture, Allied forces recovered roughly 1,100 major pieces from his primary storage location near Berchtesgaden. Additional pieces were found at other properties or recovered over subsequent decades. What we don't know is what happened to the remaining 300 to 400 documented pieces. The most likely explanation is that they're scattered across multiple fates. Some were probably destroyed during the war's chaotic final months. Others may have been seized by Soviet forces and remain in Eastern European collections. Many likely entered the legitimate art market through intermediaries and now hang in museums or private collections with sanitized provenances. A few might still be hidden in locations that haven't been identified or searched. Will we ever find it all? Probably not. But the search continues because it must. Each recovered piece represents a small victory for historical justice. Each successful restitution returns something precious to the families from whom it was stolen. And each investigation uncovers new details about how the Nazi looting apparatus functioned, adding to our historical understanding. The story of Goering's treasure is ultimately a story about human nature, greed, power, obsession, but also persistence, justice, and the refusal to forget. Goering imagined his collection would secure his legacy as a great patron of culture. Instead, it became testament to one of history's greatest cultural crimes. Today, researchers continue examining archives, following leads, and working to identify questionable pieces in museums and private collections. Technology improves. International cooperation strengthens. And occasionally, something remarkable happens. A painting resurfaces, a witness comes forward, a hidden document reveals new information. The complete story of what happened to Goering's hidden treasure may never be told, but the effort to tell it, to recover what can be recovered, to restore what can be restored, and to remember what must not be forgotten, that effort continues. And in that persistence lies perhaps the most important discovery of all, that even decades after these crimes, the world refuses to let them fade into history without consequence. The treasure hunt goes on, not for gold or glory, but for something far more valuable: truth, justice, and the preservation of cultural heritage that belongs to all humanity. Whether buried in an Austrian lake, hidden in a Swiss vault, or hanging unrecognized in someone's living room, Goering's missing masterpieces remain out there somewhere, silent witnesses to history, waiting to tell their stories one final time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit like and subscribe for more untold stories from history. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.